Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas. Our ongoing study in Thessalonians by Paul, written around AD 51, his second apostolic letter. We're moving into chapter 2 of 2 Thessalonians now. We're moving into the first 5 verses. These verses have been given a lot of attention over the years. There's a lot of discussion on the meaning of the parousia, the meaning of the day of the Lord, the meaning of the rapture, the gathering up of the saints. So it gets a heavy amount of commentary. We're going to take a look at the first 5 verses, and I just gave the full chart to just these 5 verses because there is so much content here to deal with. Let's begin by looking at verse 1, the far left. And Paul continues with his letter to the Thessalonians. Additionally, we implore you, brothers, we request, we entreat of you, by the returning advent of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our being gathered together in that advent, in that parousia, returning advent. And so, if you look at note D, the parousia, returning advent, is linked with 2 events here. It's linked with the day of the Lord, which we will see in verse 2, and it's linked with the gathering of the ecclesia church, which we already discussed in 1 Thessalonians 4:16 through 18. A false understanding of the day of the Lord had affected the church's understanding of the parousia gathering. The parousia and the rapture of the church are aspects of the same eschatological consummation and cannot be separated. And that is certainly the case. Parousia is the counterpoint to the revealing of the lawless one that will also take place. And as the day of the Lord, Christ will destroy the lawless one. And Paul's use of episunago here for the gathering, the concern was not about whether the day had already come. The real concern was that it was at hand, that it was imminent. That was the false teaching. And that's from Green's commentary, and I agree with that. The literal translation of the Greek says that the false teaching was that they had been told that the parousia was at hand. At any moment it would occur. And Paul is going to correct that misunderstanding because certain things have to take place first, says Paul, in these verses before the returning parousia, returning advent of Jesus Christ will take place. Therefore, it is not imminent. It is not going to happen any moment. And he wants to correct that false teaching that they received. If you look at verse 2, Paul says, I do not want you to be quickly shaken. I don't want you to be stirred up by false teaching. I don't want you to be stirred up by the vibration of false teaching. I don't want your minds to become distorted and misaligned on the truth. I don't want you to be troubled. I don't want you to be alarmed at any false teaching that comes to you by spirit or by word or by letter, even if it says that it is authored by us. Don't be fooled by any counterfeit letter. Any false teaching that you get that says the day is at hand is a false teaching. Do not be moved from the truth I taught you while I was there and ministered for 3 weeks. Do not be moved off the truth that I already gave you. Do not be moved by the false teaching that the day is at hand, that the parousia is imminent. So we get immediately at the beginning of chapter 2 here, Paul's intent is to correct a false teaching that the Thessalonica believers had received, that the parousia was imminent, that it could happen at any moment. Paul says, I already taught you concerning the timing of the returning parousia advent. Do not be moved off the truth that I gave you. Do not be shaken. Do not be misled by a false letter, by a false witness. And if you look at verse 3, Paul goes on to say, do not let anyone deceive you. Don't be ek apatao. Don't be deceived in any way whatsoever, because the parousia shall not have come except first there comes the apostasy. The falling away from the truth must come first. The apostasia, the great apostasy must occur first, says Paul, before the parousia, returning advent, will take place. And he continues and says, and except there is first revealed, disclosed in the apocalypse, the man of lawlessness, there also will be a disclosure of the man of lawlessness. That's the word he uses, the anthropos tes anomos. The man of lawlessness will be revealed. The one who stands against the law will be revealed. The son of destruction will be revealed. The one who is out of ruin. So we look at note H in verse 3, note H. Before the day of the Lord occurs, two events will take place. The great apostasy will take place, and the revealing of the man of lawlessness will be revealed. In Jewish eschatology, before the end there would be a great apostasy that was commonly believed in the Judaic faith. We can cross-reference Psalm 89:22 here, where the son of wickedness is referenced. Specifically, the Roman emperor was the prototype figure for this coming man of lawlessness, and the concept of son of destruction points to the fact that the man of lawlessness will be destroyed. It's not speaking of the destruction that he causes, but Paul is saying that he will be overcome. He will be rebuked and overcome and destroyed by the returning parousia advent of Christ. So two things will occur before the parousia returning advent takes place. There will be the great apostasy, the great falling away from the truth. And there will be the revealing of the man of lawlessness. The man against the law will be revealed also before the parousia returning advent can ever take place. So Paul offers us immediate correction to the believers in Thessalonica. He goes on in verse 4 to talk about this man who stands against the law that will be disclosed and revealed at the just prior to or at the returning parousia advent of Jesus Christ. And in verse 4 he goes on to say that this opposing one, this one who opposes the truth and opposes the law, he will exalt himself. He will actually exalt himself above every normal measure. He will exalt himself above everything that is called God. He will posit himself as God. And he will posit himself as that which is worshipped in the temple. He will posit himself as an object of worship. And he will sit in the temple as God. And Paul uses a kathidzo to settle down or to be self-appointed as a deity here. He's saying this opposing one, this one who opposes the truth, will actually put himself and self-appoint himself as one to be worshipped as God. Now, throughout the Roman Empire, Augustus was celebrated as divine, and even in Thessalonica, a temple was erected to honor him. Thessalonica was the hub of the emperor cult, and furthermore, the emperor also put his own image in place to be worshipped, as with the coins that were manufactured. We have an even closer parallel that could be made if we look at Caligula, who actually tried to have his image placed in the Jerusalem temple in AD 40, but it never did occur because he was assassinated in AD 41. But Caligula actually tried to put his image in the Jerusalem temple. So it does very much align with the imperial cult. The imperial cult was a civic institution that anticipated the final revelation of this man of lawlessness. Now, if you look at note F, we need to also discuss the term used here. It's important to understand here that the concept of naos for temple, Paul uses naos for the spiritual temple or the church. But it's always the spiritual temple and not the concrete physical temple. There are 3 examples of Paul's usage. In 1 Corinthians, the naos equals the church. In John 2:19, where John is writing, Jesus refers to himself as the naon that will be raised up in 3 days, the spiritual temple. In 1 Corinthians 6:19, the individual believer is the temple which is filled with the Holy Spirit. So naos is always the spiritual temple, or the church, the body of believers. So this false one, this one who opposes the truth of Jesus Christ, will raise himself up as one to be worshipped within the church, within the body of believers. Will be a false man of lawlessness who opposes the aletheia truth of Jesus Christ. Paul uses hieron whenever he speaks of the physical temple in Jerusalem, not naos. Naos is for the spiritual temple, which he usually understands as the church, as can be seen in 1 Corinthians. Now, if you look at verse 5, Paul says, "Don't you remember that when I was with you for 3 weeks, I already taught you this truth. I taught you this truth about the coming of the parousia, returning advent of Jesus Christ. I taught you about the things that must take place first. I'm now reminding you and reinforcing that in your mind. I don't want you to be easily moved away from the truth that I gave you before. Do not be moved off in alignment with Jesus Christ and in alignment with the aletheia truth in Jesus Christ that I gave to you before when I was with you for 3 weeks in ministry." So we get a lot of information in 5 verses, and it gets thoroughly discussed by many, many commentators. There's a great deal of material written on these 5 verses. A lot of work goes into commentating on these 5 verses. But it all deals with the fact that the parousia, returning advent, is linked with 2 events. It's linked with the day of the Lord, which is the judgment against those who persecute the church. But it's also the day of gathering, the gathering up of the ecclesia in rapture, which was discussed in 1 Thessalonians 4:16 through 18. So it does include judgment as day of Lord, and it includes gathering as rapture. Paul says, "Do not be moved off the truth that I taught you, that this will be the 2 events that will occur with the parousia, returning advent of Jesus Christ. Don't be moved off the truth." Then he adds additionally that in addition to that, there will also be 2 events that take place on the negative side. There's going to be the great apostasy, which will occur. And there will be the revealing of the one who opposes the truth and opposes the law. The man of lawlessness will be revealed. So you have the day of the Lord coming in judgment. You have the day of the gathering and the rapture. You have the rebuke and the punishment of the day of the Lord. And you have the unveiling of the one who opposes the truth, the one who opposes the law. All of this falls under the doctrine of the parousia, returning advent of Jesus Christ. And Paul wants to emphasize this, and he wants to remind the Thessalonica believers to not be moved off the truth, to not be moved off a counterfeit letter that might try to move them from what he already taught them. Hold firm to the truth I taught you when I ministered there for 3 weeks. And this lawless one will be rebuked, he will be destroyed, he will be overcome by the returning parousia of Jesus Christ. He will be overcome. So Paul tries to remind them again to be alert, to be awake. looking toward the returning parousia, but it is not imminent, because first you need to be awake and alert and looking toward the signs, and those signs are going to be the sign of the great apostasy and the sign of the one who opposes the truth of Jesus Christ. Be awake and be alert and stay firm and stand firm in the truth that I already gave you, and look for these signs that will precede the parousia, returning advent of Jesus Christ. So that wraps up lesson 14. Like I said, it was only 5 verses, but we had to give it the entire chart because it had so much content, and it really does deal with an extremely critical issue that Paul was trying to correct. False teaching was already permeating the Thessalonica church, and they were getting confused about the meaning of the day of the Lord judgment and the day of gathering rapture. And Paul had to remind them that there's going to be a coming great apostasy. There's going to be the one unveiled and revealed who is the one who opposes the truth of Jesus Christ, the lawless one. Paul had to reaffirm all that he taught. He said, I taught all of this during the 3 weeks I ministered with you, but now I'm laying it down in writing again to reaffirm that I want you to stand firm in the truth that you have been given. That'll wrap up chapter 2, 1 through 5.